We cobbled together some funding and built a 15,000 square foot rooftop greenhouse in the Greenpoint neighborhood of Brooklyn in 2011. We started pitching supermarket chains, restaurants, we started inviting chefs into the greenhouse facility, and within 3 months we were completely sold out of the produce. And that's when we realized that we were really onto something and we should probably expand. And then a really compelling partnership opportunity came along with Whole Foods Market, which at the time was one of our largest customers. And we crafted an idea to actually design and build a commercial scale greenhouse into the roofs of one of their new supermarkets in Brooklyn, New York. That was almost double the size of the first one and provided our brand with a lot of visibility. Lo and behold, within a few short months of opening that second greenhouse facility, we were yet again sold out of the produce. So we started looking at Chicago, which is also a city with a thriving food culture and a consumer base that's increasingly demanding high quality fresh produce. And that facility is our largest until date, which is about 80,000 square feet or 2 acres. That produces the equivalent of about 50 acres of conventional field farming. This form of farming, which is known as controlled environment agriculture, is really a combination of horticultural science as well as environmental engineering. It was a challenge to find people with this very unique skill set. We conceived of an idea to establish an in-house training program that we now call Gotham Greens University. So we're able to take young graduates out of university or high school vocational programs focused on science and biology and train them to really design these facilities and operate them. Our company has built 4 greenhouse facilities across 2 cities. We have about 160 employees. We've experienced about a 20x growth rate since inception. In our first year of operations, we grew about 500,000 heads of lettuce and leafy greens. And last year, we grew over 20 million heads of lettuce and leafy greens. I believe the future will have us expanding to other cities across the United States, expanding into new products, new product development. Our motto is to be able to harvest and deliver within 24 hours, to be able to provide consumers with the freshest possible product and the best tasting product.
MGEMI is a new luxury brand that's providing the customer with the highest quality Italian shoes at prices that have never been historically possible until now. We looked at the luxury marketplace, and there were so many qualities about luxury that were great, but there were some qualities that needed some real reinvention. The incumbents certainly were not reinventing. Shoes happened to be a category that we fell in love with because we love obsession. We want to be a business that occupies a spot, a place in the customer's mind all the time. Shoes create that unique obsession. We think that you've got to be newsworthy. You've got to be different. You've got to have a story to tell. Our consumer knows there's must-see TV every Monday, and it's not about markdowns, it's not about private sales, it's about great new product. We actually don't release that many more products than other traditional retailers do. We just don't do it all at once. The way we describe our company to the consumer is we're old world meets new world. We identified very early on in the business creation a team in Italy that I had some history with that we could in essence acqui-hire. And it was a group in Italy, in Florence, that have been in the shoe manufacturing business for generations. There was a whole bunch of challenges in taking the old, historical Italian shoe manufacturing industry and putting this new engine on top of it. Unlike most fashion brands that produce things 4 times a year where you have these big spikes, we're providing them with this constant demand, keeping their factories moving all of the time. We had to get them to start producing products at the pace that we wanted them produced. The only way to solve that was to learn. They've done a pretty good job of learning through our data. They've done a pretty good job of learning through our forecasting what opportunities they can receive by moving faster than they've ever moved before. They've been pretty open to listening about ways to improve their demand forecasting and ways to improve their speed of production, but they're not so open to listening to better ways to make shoes, that's for sure. Probably rightly so. We opened our first store in Soho. 80% of those customers who bought in the store first buy their second purchase online. If you're buying things with the frequency that our consumers buying them, the luxury of multi-channel drives to their purchase pattern. 50% of our buyers come back and buy a second time. Once they buy a second time, on average, they average 4 purchases within a year. We're also seeing consistent 100% growth year over year in total sales and margin continuing to improve in each of those years. So the goal is not go as fast as you can go and grow as fast as you can grow. The goal is with really good controlled growth, ensure that you can double your business for a number of years.
Box is an online warehouse club. We cut out the membership fees and we deliver it right to you, generally in 2 days or less with free shipping. I grew up in the suburbs of tropical New Jersey, and then moving into Manhattan later in life, I didn't have a car to get to a warehouse club. And so I thought, how many other folks around the country have that similar problem? And so actually moved back into the burbs to start the company in a small 2-car garage in Central Jersey, tape gun in hand. We went after and tried to solve that problem. In the early days, we actually didn't have a marketing budget. Our marketing budget was virtually zero. It forced us to be creative. It forced us to create a very good service where folks would talk about it. So Hoda and Kathy Lee loved the service. They were both like, genius. Sure enough, they talked about us, and from that moment on, we capitalized on that opportunity, went out and raised our first sizable round of financing, and then moved out of the garage. A gigantic challenge that we had actually came up when we started expanding our footprint throughout the US. It kind of forced us to make a decision, are we short-term or are we long-term? Treating people right is actually a short-term detriment, meaning that it's so easy to take away benefits or say, hey, we'll pay a minimum wage because you see an instant pop on your financial statements. I don't believe that's a long-term good way to drive the business. We took the long-term approach. No matter if you work in a fulfillment center and it's your first day, or you're the chief marketing officer of the company, we're all one team. We need to treat everyone fairly. In the short run, there might not be a line for increased morale and increased sense of team. But over the long run, I truly believe that that will pay huge dividends. To this day, we picked that road and it has become who we are. Folks have chosen to spend their money with us in pretty large amounts because we do the right thing. Now, our fulfillment footprint is 4 locations throughout the United States, 4 fulfillment centers, 3 offices, and a life spent on an airplane for me these days. Last year was our 3rd full year in business, and we went from virtually 0 in our first year to over 9 figures in that 3rd full year. So it's always been a dream of ours, and especially mine, to push the button at the New York Stock Exchange. We've identified an area where there's a real dearth, a real lack of solutions, and for us it's about staying focused, not trying to be the everything store, doing wholesale and doing warehouse clubs and doing it right.
Brit&Co is a new media company that largely reaches millennial women and aims to inspire, inform, and empower them to be more creative. My past is largely out of tech companies. I worked at Google and Apple, and I started realizing the world of digital media was becoming a big trend. I left Google at the age of 25. I was not married yet, and I had saved up enough money to bootstrap my own business for about 6 months. And ultimately, within that 6 months, I made enough traction to raise a seed round, and the rest was history. We have a three-legged stool of revenue. The first is through advertising, and we do primarily native advertising, so branded content as well as experiences and events. We also sell classes online. We have almost 100 courses that women pay for. And then the last leg is through our merchandising business. So one big challenge over the last 12 months has been the notion of whether or not to put our content natively on distributed platforms, ranging from Snapchat to Pinterest to Facebook and Instagram. A lot of the platforms will automatically give you a little bit more reach per their algorithm if you're putting content natively on them. However, they initially had not built monetization tools. So it was a question as to whether we wanted to sacrifice our control over our content and our distribution. I personally believed that the social networks and all of these platforms would get nowhere if they didn't have great high-quality content, and that they would figure out a way to support those people who are providing that content. And that's been paying off. We now reach 125 million uniques a month. We also have 350% growth in revenue bookings year over year. Some of our newer business segments, like our online classes, have grown over 300% year over year as well. We are producing over 100 pieces of content every day and hundreds of videos every month. I think it's so important for a digital brand to have an offline counterpart, especially for any brand that's trying to reach millennials or Gen Z. So we started an event called Remake 4 years ago, just a year into the business. Fast forward to today, it's a 15,000 person festival. It's been doubling in size year over year, which is proof that it's working and that it's only going to go bigger and better from here. We know millennial women, and we want to create content for them no matter where they are and no matter what they're listening to, reading, watching, or generally consuming.
We are a luxury bedding destination that's online only and direct to consumer. The company was started by my wife and I, and we were in the market for new sheets. We just really hated the shopping experience. It wasn't consistent with what we're used to with shopping with apparel or other items online. We first started with some of our savings, I'd say about $20,000, to get the prototypes going, build a website, do a photo shoot. It really went to the bare minimum product. And then we raised a little bit of money from friends and family, about another $100,000 or so. That got us to our Kickstarter, where the goal of the Kickstarter was to finance our first purchase order. Our goal was $50,000 of sales. We ended up selling $230,000 worth of product in the first 30 days with no marketing dollars spent, really just word of mouth. Social media has been really, really important to building the brand and getting the word out. There's some logical people that are in market for our product. People that move into new apartments. Facebook has this data of an address change. People recently engaged that are doing registries. Pinterest is really, really great for the home decor space. And then there's influencers, that people that really spread the word and advocate for the product. We're very confident that once it gets into someone's hands that they're gonna love it. We didn't take any funding until very recently, and we bootstrapped the whole thing, so we had to sell to buy. We would sell all of our inventory, use that money, and roll it over to buy more inventory and more and more. And that created problems of like this up and down, up and down, up and down. It's very hard to get momentum and the wheels turning when that happens. It's planning ahead, getting ahead of your inventory, getting ahead of the demands, just to make sure that you have enough to facilitate the growth. It seems simple, but it's super complicated, the forecasting element that we've gotten much better at. And that's one of the biggest challenges to any consumer products business in year 1 or 2. Our first year of sales was about $250,000, was mostly the Kickstarter. Year 2 was 10x growth. We broke 20 million in sales last year, so it was another 10x, and now we're on pace to more than double that yet again this year. 5 years down the road, who knows, we might be the biggest bedding home goods company in the world. We might get acquired by a bigger company that's looking to get a closer relationship with the customers. Once we feel like the bedding category, like we've really mined everything that's there that we could, then there's opportunity to move on to other categories that supplement it in the home space as well. But we're not ready for that. There's a lot more to do where we are right now.
Dia & Co is a personalized online shopping service for women who wear sizes 14 and above. Plus-size women in the U.S. make up about 67% of the population in the U.S. and pretty shockingly make up only 17% of apparel spend in the U.S. Dia was founded on the simple mission of really creating equality for her as a customer and therefore really bringing her to the table for the first time within fashion. One of the things that was very clear for our customer was she was as underserved in retail as she was in media. And what that meant was that discovery channels were actually quite challenging. The one group of people who had meaningful sway and were truly, in a way, the gatekeepers of the plus-size community were the bloggers. And bloggers became our earliest advocates. From there, we benefited from word of mouth and the power of a positive experience, and we've kind of grown from there. We very quickly realized that we had this growing, avid, excited customer base and a distribution network that was working. And where we were having the biggest trouble was in finding really great supply. We're based in New York City, and we would literally scour Manhattan to find the best merchandise in our customers' sizes to send. Eventually, we were able to work with a group of designers that agreed to partnering with us to expand what they were offering. So we've worked with some of the best design and product development teams in the industry to develop 8 brands that are exclusively at Dia, and those brands in a lot of ways make up the backbone of the service. We recently elevated the call that we were making to brands by taking out a full-page ad in the New York Times on the first day of Fashion Week, really calling on brands to step up. The conversation around inclusivity in fashion is one that is had often, but what we haven't seen yet is an actual move from speaking about inclusivity to actually producing the garments that women can wear. And that's a role that we can play, that we feel a responsibility to play, and that we're very excited to play for our customers. The core of our product is understanding our customer as well as is possible. We serve women who are very early in their style journey and some who are much farther along in terms of understanding what they like and what they don't like. And the goal of the service is to really meet her where she is. And it really becomes an iterative relationship where we're showing her product, she's giving us feedback, we're showing her better product, she's giving us feedback, and over time, we get to know her incredibly well. Our mission at Dia is to be the beloved brand of plus-size women.
We were able to start Warby Parker with $120,000. That enabled us to build a website, get some PR support, and purchase our initial inventory of frames. I remember launch really vividly. It was February 2010. We made it live February 15th. We didn't tell our friends or family because we didn't know the website would work. Immediately the orders started pouring in. We hit our first year sales targets in 3 weeks, sold out of our top 15 styles in 4 weeks, and accumulated a wait list of over 20,000 people. We had to start cutting class because we were full-time students at Wharton at the time, getting our MBAs. It was really crisis management. We had orders coming in. We actually didn't have enough inventory to fulfill those orders. We had to think about a communication strategy, a customer service policy. We would just profusely apologize, but also explain to people what was going on. We just launched. We didn't expect to have this much demand. And when you tell people the details, they can have patience and they can understand and sympathize. Brands build relationships with customers much like human beings build relationships with other human beings, and that's through vulnerability. Our first store was actually my apartment. We laid out the glasses on the dining room table, and that was our first foray into learning about the bricks and mortar world. So we did a pop-up, we bought an old yellow school bus, ripped out the interior and turned it into a mobile store, went to over 15 cities across the country. In each city we would be in roughly 3 locations, so we could tell you which intersection performed best for us. So suddenly we had a roadmap for where to open stores. We now have 46 stores across the country. It's really been an important part of Warby Parker's growth. We founded Warby Parker to create a company that would do good in the world. At the very beginning, we committed to distribute a pair of glasses for every pair that we've sold, and we've now distributed several million pairs of glasses to people around the world. We've always believed in aggressive but sustainable growth. There's this mentality of move fast and break things. We believe in moving fast, but move fast deliberately, and when you break things, let's make sure it's not catastrophic. By staying focused and reducing complexity as much as possible, you can actually grow faster, longer. We're trying to build a company that's going to be around for the next 100 years.
Dara, thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
I've always been relieved ever since you were appointed, because at least until your appointment, I seem to have the most unpronounceable name. But now so we will keep it as Dara and John. This conference is called The Year Ahead, but in your case, you are close to 6 months into the job. And I wondered what you saw in terms of the year ahead at Uber as your biggest challenge. What's the thing that you think about most when it comes to 2018?
We definitely have our share of challenges at Uber. And for me, where I want to get Uber to the year ahead is a year of normalcy. 2017 was, I think, will go down as one of the most difficult years for any company out there. And I have to give credit to the Uber team and the employees there. It is a group of true believers who believe in our mission, who believe in mobility as a service being available to consumers everywhere at a reasonable cost. And what my job in 2018 is to get rid of the distractions and get the company back to business, get the company back to normalcy. There's a lot that we've done in the past 6 months as far as bringing in new investors, driving a new culture and norms where doing the right thing, period, comes first, bringing a new management team, et cetera. There's a lot that we've gotten done, but this is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world. And I just want to get back to doing business.
It's quite interesting. You said true believers.
Yeah.
Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, et cetera. That is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well,
peanuts by the standards of...
Profits would help. So at some point, we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
Do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make, you talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things spar against each other?
I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues. that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes, because working with governments, regulators, et cetera, sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got as sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you? I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most, I suppose, out of these different things?
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent, and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire. And I think as a company, we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
But some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine, because we've learned our lessons of the past, and I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, et cetera, but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea of there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are 3 keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all 3 are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, et cetera. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in
mean to a
means
layman like
feathering
me?
crashing. Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything mapped perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities. And it will take time, but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
And will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will...
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. Okay, this is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars, 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It is a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
But it's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there. But again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate. And it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are. Much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners right now.
Do you think the regulation on flying cars, I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars, you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back somewhat reluctantly back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets rather than going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is a
you
brand.
had that motto, everywhere. What's it? Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for everyone.
Do you want to make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people. That's
telling me.
Just not interesting. I do think seriously though the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point we are leaning forward, and 2018 for us is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keener on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy, and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question, do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this time this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right place for Uber as a company, but I think in general, we're not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue, perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever than people, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, you know, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers the tendency is, well, let them get away with some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous because they have followership within the company because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership, so it is incredibly important for the top performers to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else because they're the ones who have followership at the company and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values. And one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at and it's all nice. It's about behavior. And we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Is that, do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company. And to some extent with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
If you look around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes.
Where else do they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in this space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
Is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. Origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Light Bright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch, some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file, and we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I think I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it. Can we seal the tube off? Sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. We bring it over to the aging table where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
LeBron James and Maverick Carter are boyhood friends turned business partners, and in March, they put together their most ambitious deal yet.
When we talk about storytelling, we want to be able to hit home.
Launching a new media empire called the Spring Hill Company, James and Carter have become new generation content players, advising companies how to reach people of color, leveraging the name, connections, and principles of the world's most famous sports star.
It's our mission and my duty as an individual and as working at the Spring Hill Company to give people exposure.
But since March, the ground under James and Carter's project has shifted, with the pandemic putting the NBA season on hold and protests forcing America to confront issues of racial injustice. I spoke with LeBron James and Maverick Carter in person in February, and in June I connected with them again on Zoom in their first interview since the world lockdown due to COVID-19 to get their thoughts on what's been taking place in the streets.
In the case of George Floyd, in the case of so many other innocent lives being taken away, they've put up a stand, and now, we're being heard.
Join us for a special Bloomberg Business Week, a conversation with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. Welcome to a special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Jason Kelly in New York. This week's cover story, The King and the CEO. I sat down with LeBron James and Maverick Carter at the Lakers practice facility in California in February. None of us knew then how the world was about to change. They were excited to announce a big deal, and it's still a big deal. On March 11th, the same day the NBA suspended its season, and a little more than a week before LA went into lockdown, they formed the Spring Hill Company. It's a media venture and more, raising $100 million.
Well, it allows us to grow, and that's one of the number one things, but more for us to continue to empower people, continue to empower the athlete, continue to empower storytelling, continue to empower so many great minds that we have, that we've been able to gain over these years in order to build this company.
As this deal comes together, as what we want to continue to do with the Spring Hill Company and Uninterrupted is to take creators, people with fantastic minds, amazing stories that care about the communities and people and places that we come from, that we care about, that we know. We're going to lean in to that community and really tell stories that matter to them, create experiences and products that matter to those people, because we really care about those people. We know how they feel in this time, as you said, in 2020, people want to feel empowered. I feel like it's our mission and my duty as an individual and as working at the Spring Hill Company to give people exposure, give people experiences, give them stories that make them actually feel something that is more than they felt before they walked into an experience that we gave them, whether it be storytelling or a product.
There are a lot of athletes who choose to keep their sport as their platform, what they do on the court. You have markedly chosen not to do that. Why did you make that decision?
At the end of the day, to each his own. But for me, coming from where I come from and knowing my upbringing and seeing the statistics for guys like myself, not only males but also females, being underprivileged, and not having the resources to be able to make it out of your situation. And for me and for Maverick and for all of us, the guys that I grew up with, for us to be able to make it out of that situation, I felt like it was only right and a responsibility for me to give back those resources that I've gained along the way to the youth and to the kids that's growing up, behind me, to let them understand and let them know that you can also make it out as well.
Right.
It was something that I didn't choose. I think it chose me.
Right.
It chose me, and once I felt that, I was like, okay, this is my responsibility to know that I have to continue to empower the people, not only in my community, but all over the world as well.
Right.
Well, also, it's the platform, but also it's when you grow up like LeBron and I did, it's more than anything, honestly, it's the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you grow up in a place like we are, no matter how talented you are, no matter how good you are at something, and you believe it, if you don't even know things exist, and you're not exposed to them, then there's no way for you to ever even feel empowered because you're like, I'm confined to this small world.
Well, I would say that it all stemmed from my upbringing. It all stemmed from Akron. It all stemmed from all these people that we've met along the way that grow up in similar situations. And for us, when we talk about storytelling, we want to be able to hit a lot of homes where they feel like they can be just as part of that story, or they feel like, oh, you know what, I can relate to that story because I am someone that's going through that same situation. But as far as what we do, it's very organic to to our upbringing.
And that seems to be at the core of what you're trying to do with this company, Maverick. Is that fair?
Well, I would say at the core of the company is a mission, and it's about empowering greatness to every individual around the world through entertainment, content, products, and experiences. And that mission is and that vision is the company that we want to build. And then we build products, whether they be content, events, experiences, apparel, that fits that mission instead of the other way around, which a lot of companies build products and then write a mission, right? We're a company with a mission.
Coming up, my second and latest conversation with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. They speak frankly about the powerful wave of protests sweeping across America and NBA's return to play. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Some things you see coming, some things you don't. The trick is to be ready for anything. Pablo from Infrastructure Support is working every day to keep essential market data flowing seamlessly. We keep on, so you can keep on.
Give you a sense of the real-time action, the 10-year yield tumbling now 11 basis points, so continuing in this knee-jerk risk-off feel.
Welcome back to a special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Jason Kelly. This week's cover story, a conversation with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. While I sat down with the duo in California in February, it's clearly a very different world today. Of course, James and Carter didn't plan to introduce this new company at this time. That blacks are dying from COVID at more than twice the rate of whites, and a recession in which black unemployment numbers have climbed to their highest level in more than a decade, or at a time when a historic wave of protests are sweeping the country and the world. I caught up with them recently via Zoom.
We've been through a lot, this year. You look at the death of Kobe Bryant that we had to deal with, and obviously, our prayers are still with Vanessa and the two daughters that's here. So, that was a tragic moment for us. You come to the point where the playoffs are almost around the corner, and then, it stopped because of a world pandemic and COVID-19. So, We just all had to be at bay and just kind of wait around and see what was going on and see what was happening, but understanding that the health of every individual is so much more important at that point in time than worrying about chasing a ring or chasing a championship, because there were lives at risk and no one had an answer to it. And then bring us up to speed to the George Floyd killing, and just seeing that video and seeing how many people were hurt, not only in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, but all over the world, and especially in the Black community, because we've seen this over and over and over, about police brutality and the things that goes on in the inner city when being, racially profiled as an African American Black man or as a Black woman, and things that's going on. So, it's been a lot that's going on in 2020.
Is this a moment, a special moment, and an important moment for activism in your mind?
Activism and activists have always been around, but people had a closed ear and a closed mind, and didn't want to recognize and didn't want to hear and didn't want to be knowledgeable about what they were speaking, where they were coming from, the passion that they were speaking with. Now it's being heard. People can be heard. Black Americans, African Americans, can be heard. Both men and women can be heard of what they're passionate about, and the calling for help and the calling for we're just tired. So, I don't want to say activism is something that's now everyone's doing it. No, it's always been around. But in the case of George Floyd, in the case of so many other innocent lives being taken away, they've put up a stand, and now we're being heard, and everyone is being heard. Not only from what Muhammad Ali was saying, there's so many that came before him and so many after him, but even the local people, the people in the community, because those are the real ones, the people that's in the communities, that's living and walking those streets and being racially profiled and being judged every day that they walk in their cities. They're the ones that need to be heard, and they're being heard right now, and it's great to see.
And LeBron, we move from that to More Than a Vote that was launched officially this week. What does success look like for More Than a Vote as you look toward November?
I think success looks like educating the people that's on the grounds in these cities that we're tackling. We've had voter suppression for so long. People not understanding how they can vote, where they can vote, if their vote really counts. In the Black community, you always hear go out and vote, but what you don't understand is, who am I voting for? Where can I vote? How many people am I voting for? What does these votes mean? What do they stand for? So the education side is what we're most proud about.
And Maverick, I do wonder, to speak to this moment where we are, given that you were positioned to do this via Spring Hill, what are the conversations that are incoming to you, whether it's from studios, whether it's from CEOs of companies? Are your calls getting returned more? Or is there more interest in what you're doing, given that the world does seem to be moving in this moment?
Yeah, and you keep calling it a moment. Hopefully it's not just a moment, right? I don't want to call it a moment. This is what's needed. This is actually more like what this country should be and what this world should be. So it's not a moment. It doesn't feel at all like a moment to me. As I said, I've been Black my whole life, right? So and pushing to empower all people, and specifically Black people, my whole life. We've always been about empowering people who feel like us and come from the communities that we come from and want to believe in our mission. And the content we've created, who we've created that content with, has always been about that. It's obviously a bit magnified now. We're getting some external calls that, hey, if you guys have ideas that want to help us, sure. And me personally, I am getting a lot of calls from people, other CEOs. When I've also got a lot of calls on, what are you doing? What do you think? What do you think we should be doing? So I'm taking those all in stride and explaining to people, as I just said to you, that, hey, don't treat this as a moment. This isn't a moment. This is what you should have been doing all along. And this is what everyone needs to be doing going forward anyway.
And so, LeBron, to that point, What can you do, given your stature, to ensure that this isn't fleeting? What are the things that we need to be doing and thinking about? What can you do to really take this forward in many ways? What are you thinking about?
I will continue to point out things that I know is wrong. If I see it, not only socially, but also with cameras in my face. And I will also continue to lead by example as a model citizen, as a Black man growing up in America. So my mission stays the same.
LeBron, I do wonder, I think back to 2014 and Eric Garner and the T-shirt that you wore, and the NBA has consistently stood behind you and its players in terms of protest. Other leagues have not done that, most notably the NFL. Now the NFL has changed its tune. What do you make of that?
I do know one thing I can speak from is what I'm a part of. And I'm a part of a league with a great commissioner in Adam Silver, and he's always listened to the voice of his players. And I've always respected him for that. He's given us an opportunity to, when we feel something that's very wrong with society, that's very wrong with what's going on in our communities, that we can speak upon that and use the NBA shield to back us. And I have nothing but respect for Adam Silver. As far as the NFL, I'm not in those locker rooms. I'm not with those guys, but I do understand that an apology, I have not heard a true official apology to Colin Kaepernick on what he was going through and what he was trying to tell the NFL and tell the world about why he was kneeling when he was doing that as a San Francisco 49er. So I just see that to still be wrong. And now they are listening some, but I still think we have not heard that official apology to a man who basically sacrificed everything for the better of this world. So I can say that about that.
So when you think about what happens next from an NBA perspective, LeBron, assuming that everything stays the same, you're to be playing basketball pretty soon, which feels like good news for a lot of folks. And I would imagine, especially you, given the position the Lakers were in going into all this. Kyrie Irving has said, and I believe you have disagreed, that maybe you should think about not playing. What do you think?
You know, for us to be together as a league once again, along what's going on right now, it gives us another opportunity to continue to talk about what's going on, the social injustice, the police brutality, Black Lives Matter, and continue to hit home on things that's going on that matters a lot as well. But sports has always been something that kind of galvanized and brought people together and just make people feel, very uplifted. And I know in my community right now, we just, unfortunately, a beautiful 18-year-old girl by the name of Nakia Crawford was just gunned down in Akron, Ohio last week, a week after graduating high school. Just to get people's minds, not saying forget about certain situations, but to just have a breath of fresh air, to have a sense of love, what sports can bring. And I know what I do on the basketball court can bring a lot of happiness to a lot of households, including my own, and including my community and my kids. So I'm looking forward to the season getting restarted, getting back in the Laker uniform, and continue to push the envelope, not only on the court, but off the court, because like I've been telling a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, I won't stop until I see change. And I mean real change for us as a community, as a Black community, both on and off the floor. So my mission stays the same.
Up next, their brand is global and their goals are big. LeBron James and Maverick Carter talk about facing controversy in China and building a legacy beyond basketball. This is Bloomberg Business.
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Welcome to the Best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang.
They've moved the needle by acknowledging that they have to monitor the content.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here?
It's a huge market, it's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
It's really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
Welcome back to a special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Jason Kelly. Well, it's this week's cover story, my conversation with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. James's More Than a Vote group has been called hypocritical by some, claiming his position didn't align with his past comments, specifically when James called basketball executive Daryl Morey's support for Hong Kong protesters, quote, misinformed. When I sat down with them in February, I asked LeBron what he learned from that experience.
Best teacher in life experience, and you know how to handle it the next time, or handle it if there's another situation. So for me, I'm learning every single day.
And what'd you learn from that?
Just continue to get better. Continue to get better. And if you keep yourself at bay and you don't keep an open mind about how to continue to get better, then I think you're failing yourself.
But it's not going to prevent you from speaking out, I'm guessing, and going forward.
No. I would be cheating. I would be cheating myself and the people that follow me. That's for sure.
I read something where you mentioned that someone that you admire historically was Muhammad Ali. Why?
We'd be sitting here for 3 hours. Why?
But what do you take from his experience? Because I think part of the context of the quote was he did, some percentage of good for the world by his sport, but so much was beyond the ring.
Because at the end of the day, it wasn't just everyone was so fascinated how great of a boxer he was. I think that was the least thing in his mind. I think every day he was trying to figure out how he can better the world and better the people around him and make a change for the greater of good. And like I said, no matter if people agree with him or not.
Right.
I think 80, 90% of people didn't agree with anything that he did back when he was doing it. But that didn't stop him. He stayed focused on his mission. And that's what we're talking about, like the mission. What is your mission? And there's going to be people that's going to agree with you along that time. There's going to be people that don't agree. More than likely, it's going to be more than half that don't agree. But you can't allow that to stop your mission. Like, what is your mission? And for Ali to be able to do the things that he did in the time that he did as well, being African American during those times, it doesn't matter. And the fact that we can see it and it was captured.
Right.
And we can watch it and see it and read about it and things of that nature, I don't think we deserve it.
Right. This notion of empowerment, and Mav alluded to this at the top of the conversation, you've been a leading voice in that. You've changed the NBA in a lot of ways. You've changed the dynamic between players and coaches and even players and owners. Why do you think that happened? What was the sort of moment? Or was it just a natural evolution of who you are?
I don't know. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as I make my decisions based upon me and my career and my family. And if it's changed the landscape of something, then hopefully for the greater good. Hopefully for the greater good, because I only want the game to be great while I'm in it and even better off when I leave it. So hopefully that the decisions that I've made along my career, hopefully it's bettered the game, and it also inspired, the guys that come, after me to continue to make this game the greatest game in the world, in my opinion. So
But we have seen an evolution, it feels like. Maverick, maybe it's more comfortable for you to talk about LeBron's impact there. I mean, the NBA, by many accounts, has changed more dramatically than other professional sports, largely driven by the prominence of certain athletes and the athletes' ability to be bigger than the game. What do you think that is?
Yeah, I would say part of it is just the natural evolution of life and the game of basketball. And a big part of it is the people involved, all the people involved from the late, great David Stern to Magic and Larry and to the brands that are involved in basketball, right? All the brands that are involved in basketball, and then the NBA, now to Adam Silver, to up to players like LeBron and new owners. I think it's been mostly just a natural evolution, but also the people who are at the top of the sport, the superstars like LeBron, people like Adam Silver, being okay with change and pushing the envelope a bit has been a big reason. I think you know, no player is bigger than the game. The game of basketball is obviously a global sport. It's big business, and the NBA goes on, right? Lots of players come and go, and the NBA keeps going on. But I think, to your question of LeBron, the point, and LeBron's point is, while he's an NBA player and he's been playing for a long time and got who knows how long, much longer to play, is while he's playing to have the greatest impact he can to push it forward, to leave it in a better place for the next athletes that are coming in. And then it's their job. Then it's their turn. They have to do it as a player. And if LeBron becomes an owner or whatever he decides to do, he can do it from a different angle, right?
Maverick opened the door as well. Do you want to own a team someday?
It would be great.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great. I just want to stay around the game. I love the game of basketball. It's given so much to me, and if it's a possible chance that I could to own a team or you know, obviously be a part of a team, that would be amazing. So we shall see.
And that wraps up our Bloomberg Business Week special edition, my conversation with LeBron James and Maverick Carter. You can read the cover story. It's available on newsstands now, also online at businessweek.com and through our mobile app. And check out Bloomberg Business Week Radio. It's on Sirius XM channel 119, AM 1130 in New York, 1061 in Boston, 99.1 FM in Washington, D.C., AM 960 in the Bay Area, and in London on DAB Digital, and of course through the Bloomberg Business app. I'm Jason Kelly. More Bloomberg Television starts right now.
The national security bill was passed by Chinese lawmakers. The Hong Kong police force has already acted in accordance with the new law.
It's a very disturbing development.
This is, in effect, an attempt to end one country, two systems.
The central government is telling us just stay out of politics.
Cities across the United States are gradually reopening, hoping for a quick recovery amidst a devastating pandemic and one of the biggest crises in modern history. In Boston, the COVID-19 crisis already adds up to $65 billion in lost revenue, more than double initial projections. What's the way forward?
I spent a lot of time trying to encourage people in Massachusetts, keep doing what you're doing. We can't take our foot off the gas.
And how can Boston gradually reopen its businesses and storied educational institutions?
We have to assume that this disease could be with us at least throughout this academic year.
And with its vibrant biotech sector, can the city lead the way in the race for a vaccine?
Businesses that want to stay open in the midst of this will need some level of regular testing to do it.
We speak with Boston's best and brightest, the executives, policymakers, and educators on the front lines in this special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Boston, the Road to Recovery. Welcome to a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Boston, the Road to Recovery. I'm Emily Chang. We begin with a conversation about Boston's leadership through a health, economic, and social crisis as the city slowly begins to reopen.
Initially, it was getting PPE to our frontline workers. We had people working in hospitals, nurses and doctors, EMTs, firefighters who just didn't have the masks and the gear that they needed. And so that was a real challenge, getting PPE into the state. A second challenge was the really dire situation, people getting laid off from work, people who were food and housing insecure, especially in low-income communities, especially in Black and brown communities. And that was a real challenge and remains a challenge. And then finally, I think just adopting to how we were going to communicate. Everything has been done virtually. For doctors, it was learning to get them licensed to provide telemedicine, for example, to their patients. So a lot of challenges in the early days, probably most of all, just not knowing what we were going to get from the federal government. And frankly, the federal government not being there to support our state or other states in the way they should have.
So what's the situation now?
I think the situation is better. I think that people have worked really hard in Massachusetts to stay at home, wear masks, and really do what we should be doing during this time. And that's why you've seen our infection rates go way, way down. You see what's happening in other parts of the country where people just didn't behave that way, and the numbers are going through the roof. So the situation on the ground here is good. Our hospitals, our incredible hospitals, have worked so hard here in the last few months. And so I feel good about that, but I'm also nervous that as we start to reopen, people will let their guard up and not take the safe measures that they need to continue to take, because we're not going to see a vaccine for a while. I think the other problem is our economy, our restaurants in particular, small businesses. So many just shut down and probably have shut down for good. So I think building and rebuilding an economy here is really important. Colleges and universities, they're a big part of Boston and Massachusetts and our economic picture as well. And obviously they're in really dire straits right now. And so there's a lot still to wrestle with, but I'm proud of the people of Massachusetts. I think everybody's really tried to work hard together to get through to this point.
As you mentioned, Boston is home to world-class universities, hospitals, vaccine makers. How concerned are you as we're seeing cases now spiking again across the country?
Well, I'm concerned because you could have students coming from all over onto campuses here in Boston in a few months. And if they're carrying coronavirus with them, they put all of us at risk here. So I'm certainly concerned about that. But I do think we are so fortunate in Massachusetts to not only have amazing life sciences, biotech, research institutions that are truly on the front lines now in developing treatments and a vaccine, in addition to really world-class healthcare. And so we're fortunate in that way. But I am nervous about spikes as we approach the fall. And I spent a lot of time trying to encourage people in Massachusetts, keep doing what you're doing. We can't take our foot off the gas.
So obviously, children aren't as seriously impacted by the virus. From a health perspective, what have the cases of COVID-19 among children looked like to you? What have you been seeing at your hospital?
We have seen a number of children come through, both with the virus, but also with this new syndrome, the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. We've seen about 150 children with positive COVID. Most of them have had a relatively mild form of the disease, and several of them have had more need for intensive care, but they've mostly been children with underlying disease. The more sick children are the ones with this new syndrome, and we've seen just over 30 of them in the last couple of weeks. So that has been our experience, but we've been preparing for the same kind of situation that even all the adult hospitals had to as well.
So that certainly counters the point that some have tried to make that children are, quote unquote, basically immune to this virus. I mean, how concerned should we be about our children out there?
Well, children, have been testing positive. Many of them have tested positive and are not symptomatic. So the question is whether they are really also transmitters of the disease, even though they're not showing symptoms. And so that's something that we're still attempting to study to truly understand why this virus, unlike other flus, have not necessarily had the same degree of impact on children. And that's still a bit of a mystery, and therefore a lot of research that's going to go on to understand that.
What is the state of reopening there, and what's your view into how well businesses are surviving?
Well, so far it's going very well. There was a large joint effort, as you referred to, with the Mass High Tech Council, the Governor's Council, academics, business people, medical people. And we went through a huge effort under the leadership of the Mass High Tech Council to really look at the COVID-19. And this was probably 10 or 11 weeks ago, while people were focusing on fighting the virus at the hospital level. We were focusing on how would we reopen the economy once the hospitals were stabilized. And the governor and the Secretary of Health and Lieutenant Governor, I think, have done a very nice job in Massachusetts. In fact, I just saw the data today. Massachusetts has the lowest RT factor. It's 0.66 of all the 50 states right now. So far that program has worked very well.
Now, as the co-chair of Bain Capital, you've got such an interesting vantage point. What does the economic recovery look like to you? Is it a V shape or a deep V shape, as some have suggested?
Well, I think it's probably a kind of series of W's. We're going through right now nationally a second wave in many of the Western states and Florida. And so the markets dropped today. That's going to affect the economy. So it's very uncertain. The Fed has piled in with $10 trillion of government spending. And that's, I think, kept businesses going and the markets up and consumers, even with the high unemployment, spending. And therefore, it's kind of blunted the economic impact of the virus. But hopefully we can keep that up and get these other states turned around in time for some kind of therapeutics or a vaccine to come along in the first or second quarter. I'm much more optimistic about the progress they've made with therapeutics and vaccines. There's 100 and so efforts going on in the world right now to fight the virus. And we need a few of those to be successful, and hopefully they'll be successful in short order. Until then, we are going to be what I'll call an 80% economy, an economy shifting towards an e-economy. You've seen big increases in any kind of e-companies in terms of getting deliveries at home, food, goods, actually a boom in that area, where other businesses have suffered, especially businesses that require close contact.
As the economy starts to reopen, how do you expect companies to address this second shift, this shift that we are seeing on social issues, a new sort of social normal, if we will?
I think the first step is to acknowledge that companies have a problem, right? We've seen a lot of messages of solidarity going out there, but the first step is to look inside and look at the structural racism and sexism within their own ranks. And that's who's in the C-suite, who's on the board, who's holding the high-paying jobs. And so solidarity is one thing, real action is another. We actually had a shareholder proposal, and at all of those annual meetings, the management teams and the boards opposed the proposals. That's not meaningful change. And I wonder if that would happen now, 1 month later, 2 months later, as companies are really starting to reassess what they can do to both acknowledge the problem and change from the inside out.
Arjuna Capital, based in Boston, is an activist investor in Twitter and Google and Facebook. If these companies are going to continue to turn down your proposals, can you keep investing in them?
Well, we invest in these companies, in companies like Facebook, for instance, with the intent of engaging. We think they've got a strong platform, a strong position in the market, and we've been working for the last 4 years to press for change. And we've seen some change. I mean, you saw it's not enough, because certainly there's consumers and users are unhappy. You have an advertiser boycott, but you did hear Mark Zuckerberg reference the 10 million pieces of hate speech that were removed from the platform in the first quarter. The reason we know about that is because Arjuna Capital pressed for transparency on that kind of reporting.
Coming up, from vaccines to cybersecurity, how businesses in Boston are stepping up. This is a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Boston, the road to recovery.
Some things you see coming, some things you don't. The trick is to be ready for anything. John from Infrastructure Support is working every day to keep essential market data flowing seamlessly. We keep on, so you can keep on.
Europe does, as you say, have some catching up to do on that front. So we are expecting to see a little bit of strength coming through at the start of trade. How long will it last, though? The perennial question.
Welcome back to a special edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. For the second year in a row, Massachusetts took one of the top spots in Bloomberg's annual State Innovation Index. GE, Raytheon, Thermo Fisher, and Biogen are some of the biggest companies headquartered in the state, along with potentially leading vaccine makers like Merck, Sanofi, and Moderna.
The scientific and medical community believes that the biology of a virus is druggable. And so I think there's a high probability that several vaccines will make it to the finish line. It could be as early as the end of the year or early next year.
But the Boston area is also home to more than 40,000 small businesses. We spoke to some of the city's top executives about their company's road to recovery after months of sheltering in place.
We needed a lot of clinical diagnostics in sort of the first phase, the acute phase of the pandemic, where you really had doctors making decisions about people who were sick and needing to know, do they have COVID or not? We built up 300,000 or 400,000 tests like that in the United States in the last, kind of heroically in the last 3 or 4 months. Well, now what we need is much lighter weight testing. Ideally, it's not going to be a nurse administered swab. It would be something you could do yourself, either saliva or in the middle of your nose. And it would be collected just at your workplace. You wouldn't have to go anywhere. and you would do it maybe depending on how acute the outbreak is in your area, once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks, depending. And you need to actually model that. You have to do a little bit of epidemiological modeling to know, but that would be the idea.
What's been the interest from companies and schools so far? I mean, there's still so much uncertainty, and I'm sure many of them don't really know how often they're going to have to do this and for how long.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, right? I mean, a ton of interest, but I think there's also just people are confused about this, and I think rightly, because we haven't, the last time we dealt with a pandemic at the scale that would close down the global economy was in 1918. It was 100 years ago. And so, of course, we don't have any of the infrastructure built to do this well. And so, we're seeing a lot of interest, especially among schools that are trying to open, but also really major employers. And again, it's partially a workplace safety issue, but Emily, it's also business continuity, right? Tyson had to shut down 6% of poultry production in the U.S. Ford had to close the F-150 plant. Businesses that want to stay open in the midst of this will need some level of regular testing to do it.
DraftKings is based in Boston. Curious how you've been engaging with the city of Boston as you plan for a return to work, as everything has been shut down, and now the economy is starting to slowly reopen.
Now, first of all, our initial focus and continued focus primary focus, I should say, is on making sure our employees are safe. They have an environment that they feel comfortable working in from home. As people talk about returning to work, we're ensuring, as per guidelines, that only the people who absolutely have to be in the office are coming back. And, we're also continuing to try to help with job growth. We've made 0 layoffs. We've continued to hire. And we're hopeful that we can even accelerate that more. But right now, we're continuing a pretty rapid pace of hiring, even through the pandemic.
You went public in the middle of a pandemic, and even more impressive, during a freeze on sports. What's it been like leading the company through this time?
It's been really interesting. It's when you think about early on as you start a business where you're going to go, you usually don't even think about going public. And if you do, you probably think about ringing the bell and kind of the typical setup, not, virtual bell ringings and, not seeing your employees for months at a time while you're going public. So it's been an unusual and, unexpected way that we did it. But overall, it's been really successful. We've been thrilled with the receptiveness that the market's had to us. Really, appreciative of all the people that have invested in us and believe in our vision and what we're going to hopefully be able to achieve. And, for us, a lot of it comes down to just continuing to execute well, hoping that states continue to progress with legislation. I'm hoping Massachusetts will get something done in the near future, because that obviously helps us continue to build our base here. And, if we continue to execute well and good things happen on the legislative front, I think that, things will take care of themselves on the financial side. And it's obviously distracting having a public stock price now, but trying not to watch it every day.
Many people don't realize that even though Converse is owned by Nike, you're based in Boston. What's been the process of retail stores closing, reopening? Where do things stand now?
Yeah, quick one there. It's, Converse was founded over 120 years ago in New England, in Malden, Massachusetts. It's headquartered in Boston, and it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Nike. And it's kind of connected, but really independent. And so I'm based there, as well as hundreds of other employees are there. We do business in over 100 some odd countries, and North America is one of our key markets. As far as your question is around stores, Asia, fully operational. I'd say Europe, half and half, depending on the country and where they are in their kind of curve. And in North America, probably around half our stores are opening, and every day that changes based on kind of local government, regulations and what's going on in the shopping environment.
Right. Talk to us about what's happening regionally and what trends you're seeing.
Yeah, well, first, the biggest trend that we've seen, first, a trend that's already been there, which is that move to digital, with consumers buying and shopping and engaging with brands through their mobile devices. That just accelerated in the last 90 days. So no matter what market you're in, that's grown at a very, very fast pace. But what's been really interesting is that as we've opened our retail stores, or our partners have opened retail stores in Asia and Europe, and now in North America, Our consumers wanting to get back out in the marketplace to shop and interact and be back with the brand has come back faster than we anticipated, which has been very, very good.
Now, speaking about supply and demand, my producer was surprised to find that the shoes she wanted to buy for her toddler were sold out. What's the story on the supply side?
Well, you'll find in the world of sneakers and fashion, as you would know, that it can be sold out for many different reasons. One is we didn't make enough, or by design, scarcity is a part of the fashion model, that you make enough to what you think is going to satisfy a certain set of demand, but you know that you'll move on to what's next. So without knowing the exact shoe, I don't know. But what I can also tell you is that every brand is challenged right now as digital is accelerated. There's a certain pipe that enables you to go from idea in your mobile device to consumers' homes. That pipe hasn't really gotten much bigger, but consumers' demand using digital is up multiple rates, and so the pipe is full. And so what you'll find a lot of times is it's just taking longer for you to get your favorite sneaker or apparel than it would have been before COVID-19.
How much is this working from home just going to be part of our new habit?
I think it'll be very substantial for companies where employees can work from home. I think you'll see a large fraction of employees continue to do that. We've told our employees that they can work from home for the rest of the year. And I expect, in the long run, maybe half of our employees will do that on a regular basis going forward. Sometimes employees need to come in, but for a lot of companies right now, they can work very successfully remotely, and that's, safer to do, and in many cases more convenient for the employee.
Coming up, from the lecture hall to virtual classrooms, how some of the nation's top universities are adapting to the crisis and planning optimistically for the gradual return to campus. This is a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Boston, the road to recovery.
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Welcome to the Best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang.
They've moved the needle by acknowledging that they have to monitor the content.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here?
It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
Market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
We return to a special Boston edition of Bloomberg Technology. The pandemic is upending higher education, perhaps in Boston more so than anywhere else in the country, with more than 24 colleges and universities in the area. Campuses have shut down and moved online. Now the big question is, when will students return, and how will campus life be different?
If you look at this virus, one of the most insidious parts of this virus is the fact that it has a significant either asymptomatic fraction or what I call pre-symptomatic, where people can shed virus and infect other people, but they don't have symptoms. And because of that, we made the commitment back in April that we're going to do very significant PCR-based testing of our entire community. We rolled that out last week, and that will be testing everyone as they come back in the community to try to make sure that we're not bringing virus in, and then frequent testing of everyone that's coming in contact with the students and faculty throughout the semester.
Now, when it comes to COVID-19, are you anticipating integrating distance learning and a more flexible curriculum for, potentially 1, 2, 3 years to come? I mean, how long term will this be?
Well, see, I was raised to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And so I believe that all the things we put in place and the way we're talking about it is what we refer to as the new normal, is how we operate a residential university with COVID-19 in our midst. And I would love, like everyone else, to wake up in January and have a widely disseminated effective vaccine, but I don't think we can count on that. We have to assume that this disease could be with us at least throughout this academic year. And everything we are doing, every decision we're making, is to establish the kind of continuity we need to operate as a major research university throughout that period.
Do you see being integrated into the curriculum